On today's episode of the NASM CPT Podcast with me, Rick Richey, I explore how I stretch the TFL doesn't make sense, but works. How I stretch the TFL. Not all joint actions are opposite of the concentric joint action. Now, with that said, I posted how I stretch the TFL on my social media that I did at a conference recently, and I got called out by another fitness professional whom I deeply respect. So I discuss why I believe my stretch is better and why I lead you as a listener to my IG page so you can see the stretch and do it and note how I perform it and see how it doesn't make sense based off the concentric joint actions. But the hip is an interesting joint, and there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophies. So check it out. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. Now here's the episode. How I stretch the TFL doesn't make sense, but works.
You're listening to the NASM CPT Podcast with Rick Richey, winner of the Sharecare Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Hey, y'all, and welcome to the NASM CPT Podcast. My name is Rick Richey, and before I get started today, I'm going to ask the chat, hey, chat, forgive me while I boast a little bit. I am very proud because the NASM CPT Podcast and I have won a Marcum Award, and it's a gold award for industry-focused single episode. That episode was entitled AI, Am I Obsolete? Where we reviewed, Am I Obsolete as a personal trainer? Now, I am very proud of this award, and if you haven't listened to that episode, please go back and check it out. It initially aired December 10th, 2024, so if you're looking for the episode, you can just go back and look it up by date or by title, AI, Am I Obsolete? And I also want to just follow that up with, this is the second Marcum Award to go along with our Sharecare Award for this podcast for social storytelling. And I want to thank all of you who listen and learn from the episodes and what we do here at the NASM CPT Podcast. So thank you so much. Also, let me continue with my boast before we get into the podcast. This week, I posted a video from a conference, and it was a conference followed by a 2-day NASM corrective exercise workshop in Dubai. It was really cool. I got to stay on Palm Island, which is an island that they just built. They just built it. They right there in the water, and they said, let's build an island in the shape of a palm tree. Anyway, it was cool. I stayed there, and I don't actually have a story. I just wanted an excuse to tell you that I went to Dubai. I'm just kidding. I do have a story. So shout out to MedFit Pro and the wonderful summit that they put on. And for the fitness professionals who are there in the Middle East, who really committed to this, and they came to the conference sessions, and they came to the 2-day workshop and ask a lot of questions. We're really engaged, and they're all very interested in personal training and in fitness and how to move the industry forward. So shout out to all of you who came to the MeFit Pro conference and to the corrective exercise workshop. So here's one of the things that was pretty interesting. I did in the 2-day workshop, the corrective exercise workshop, MeFit Pro posted a video, and it was of me showing how to stretch the TFL. So there's a way that NASM's textbook shows how to stretch it. It is the way that almost every single other group that I've seen that talks about stretching the TFL does it. And so what I did is I said, well, this is how NASM says to do it. This is how many others say to do it. But this is a way that I found to get better outcomes. And I showed how I like to stretch it. Now, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense, because first we have to identify what the TFL does concentrically. Then we can simply just do the opposite conceptually of what it does concentrically. So let's go through it concentrically. How do we shorten this muscle? Well, number one, it's an internal rotator. The TFL is an internal rotator. So that's what it does concentrically. It is an abductor, abduction away from the midline of the body, and it's a hip flexor. So conceptually, what we do to stretch that muscle is do everything opposite of that. So we would go into external rotation at the hip, we would go into adduction at the hip, and we would go into hip extension, plus add a little posterior pelvic tilt to increase the amount of extension that exists. And yet, I rarely come across anyone who actually feels a stretch in the TFL, at least not a deep stretch. And it doesn't matter. We have overactive TFLs. We've got people doing the modified Thomas test that show TFL tightness. We have overactivity in the TFL where it becomes synergistically dominant doing some of the exercises. And yet, there's a lot of people don't feel this stretch. And so when this video got posted, it was me, and I won't tell you how I do it yet, but it kind of doesn't make sense. And there's a guy on social media that commented it, and I've got an incredible amount of respect for this person in the fitness industry. And the comment was this, quote, "So we're stretching a muscle that does flexion and abduction and internal rotation by featuring lots of flexion and abduction at the hip." All right. In the video, it basically picks up after I go through explaining this is how most people stretch it and this is how I stretch it. So now, in a moment, I'm going to go into what was different about what I do. But first, this episode of the NASM CPT Podcast is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations, access to free CEUs, and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. All right. Well, let's talk about this is how I like to stretch this muscle. All right, here we go. Step one. I showed stretching this muscle by going into a seated crisscross applesauce position. Now, if you are older than maybe 7, then remove applesauce. All right, so you're just going to sit in a crisscross position. And this puts the hip in exceptional amounts of external rotation. And then what I do is I take the top leg, and instead of the feet being crossed like this, I pull the foot over the bottom thigh. So my foot, instead of being crossed over my feet, I cross it over my bottom thigh. And so what this does is that then it adducts. So it looked, I guess, in the video that I'm abducted, but you got to take the legs and then you adduct the hips. So both knees are pointed straight ahead. This means that we have a lot of adduction and we've got a lot of external rotation. So step 3 then, if the TFL is tight, you're going to see the top knee rise up because I've done the opposite of what it does concentrically in 2 out of 3 of the joint actions. So a lot of external rotation, a lot of adduction, and then you see the tightness rise. You see the knees start to lift up. So that's hip flexion. And you can feel the stretch on the top leg TFL. You may even feel the stretch on the bottom leg TFL. And so I use the piriformis as an example of how muscles at the hip don't necessarily do what it seems like they would do because it's a unique joint. So let's go into it. Concentrically, if we shorten the piriformis, it does the following. It does external rotation at the hip, it does abduction at the hip, and it does hip extension. But how do we stretch the piriformis? We go back into that crisscross position, and then there's a lot of hip flexion, which is opposite of the hip extension. We can either do a lot of AB or adduction, which means it is either the same or the opposite. But then we do external rotation at the hip. And that, my friend, is the same thing as the joint action it does concentrically. And so you would think that if I go into external rotation, then I'm not stretching it. But in fact, when you're hip flexed and you're in that much hip flexion, it changes the line of pull for the piriformis. And so the hip external rotation seems like it wouldn't stretch the piriformis because the piriformis is an external rotator, but we push it into external rotation to stretch it more. Why? Because the change in the position of the hip leads that stretch to take place that way. So I explained this a bit to the person that I respect so much, and he graciously took the information and basically said, yeah, the hip can be weird. And I'm like, yeah, 100%. And we had a good interaction, and it was good to reconnect with somebody. But now it's your turn. So I explained the stretch, but you may want to go to the Instagram page. Go to @dr.rickricchey on Instagram, and you can see the breakdown. See how I go through that stretch. First of all, if it bothers anything, because I have some people in that crisscross position, they're like, what if it bothers my knee? Don't do it. Don't do it. You're not trying to get a stretch at your hip at the expense of hurting your knee. So anytime you feel a joint hurting, just don't do that. Right. And then if it doesn't work, like if you can't do it because of your knee in that crisscross position, then try like the typical standard way. And I think it's hard for people to get that feeling of that stretch in their TFL. But this crisscross position, just go to the Instagram story. I won't post anything for a few days, just so it's kind of, I might even pin it. I might pin it so that as you listen to this podcast for the next week or month or so, then you can just go there and you'll see me doing a standing hip flexor stretch. And that's me showing basically this is what a TFL stretch, standard stretch looks like. And then I go into showing you how I stretch it and then give it a try, see how it feels. All right. I'm going to leave that up to you. And I know some people that listen to this are part of exercise science programs. I know some universities have students listen to this. And so a lot of you are like, I don't know about this. Let me see. Yes, go see. Check it out. See if you indeed feel this more in your TFL. Methinks you will. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. And thanks to our producer, Eric Sorensen. Please like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this with your fitness friends and family. If you want to reach out to me, hit me up. You can do so on Instagram at dr.rickricchey or email me, rick.richey@nasm.org. Y'all keep inspiring people to fitness. Thanks for listening. This has been the NASM CPT Podcast.